Why is Ymir born first and Buri born second, and what is their relationship? Wouldn't Ymir being born first make him equivalent to the Vedic figure called That One, aka Prajapati? The reason Ymir is born first in Norse myth is simple. The material shell of the cosmos, this being sky-earth, Prithvi, must be formed first before that one, i.e. Buri, can emerge from the primordial watery element. We see this order of events spelled out in the Vedic corpus, although most haven't put the pieces together to see what they're describing. Everyone knows that the Vedic creation hymn, Rigveda 10.129, describes a giant divine being emerging from dark waters in the primordial moment of creation. As such, it is assumed that this would parallel Ymir, the first being to emerge in the Norse creation myth. This, however, is a misunderstanding that has caused all attempts at a coherent comparative mythology to fail from the outset. In short, Ymir is not that one who emerges from waters in the Rigveda creation hymn. Mistaking Ymir for that one comes from a misunderstanding of the details of the Vedic myth and a lack of precision in making the comparison. I will go through the evidence to clarify why this is irrefutably the case. Despite what you may think, Ymir is not that one. The Rigveda creation hymn 10.129 runs as follows in Jamieson and Brereton's translation, quote, "The non-existent did not exist, nor did the existent exist at that time. There existed neither the airy space nor heaven beyond. What moved back and forth? From where and in whose protection? Did water exist, a deep depth? Death did not exist, nor deathlessness then. There existed no sign of night nor of day. That one breathed without wind by its independent will. There existed nothing else beyond that. Darkness existed, hidden by darkness, in the beginning. All this was a signless ocean. What existed as a thing coming into being, concealed by emptiness, that one was born by the power of heat. Then in the beginning, from thought there evolved desire, which existed as the primal semen. Searching in their hearts through inspired thought, poets found the connection of the existent in the non-existent." Unquote. The hymn ends with, quote, "This creation, from where it came to be, if it was produced or if not, he who is the overseer of this world, in the furthest heaven, he surely knows, or if he does not know," unquote. Jamieson and Brereton, in their commentary on the hymn, argue that it is vaguely alluding to an egg-shaped thing being born from dark waters. Quote, "Line 3a asserts that there was something, namely darkness, covered by darkness, and 3c describes a thing coming into being, abhu, covered by emptiness. In verse 3, therefore, that one still does not have substance, but it is beginning to have shape, since there is something that is covered by something. As Tima, 1964, 66 through 67, has observed, that shape is the shape of an egg, and it is this egg-like shape that in 3D was born or hatched through heat." Unquote. As the hymn states, once it is born or hatched, this being emits kama, desire, as the primal semen. That one, the enormous being that emerges from the dark waters in this Rigveda hymn, is another name of the god Prajapati, aka Brahma, the god of the totality and form of the Absolute, as scholars have noted, and this equivalency will become clear. Prajapati is the father of the gods and the god who is equated with the totality of the universe in Vedic tradition. As such, another name of Prajapati in the Rigveda is Hiranyagarbha, or golden embryo. This golden embryo is indeed another way of naming the vaguely egg-shaped unit that emerges from the dark waters of creation. To Hiranyagarbha, the Rigveda dedicates a hymn, 10.121, and identifies him with Prajapati. Quote, "In the beginning rose Hiranyagarbha, born only Lord of all created beings. He fixed and holdeth up this earth and heaven. What time the mighty waters came, containing the universal germ, Garbha, producing Agni. Thence sprang the gods' one spirit into being. Ne'er may he harm us, who is earth's begetter, nor he whose laws are sure, the heavens' creator. He who brought forth the great and lucid waters, what god shall we adore with our oblation? Prajapati, thou only comprehendest all these created things, and none beside thee." Unquote. This golden embryo or germ is also mentioned in hymn 10.81, a hymn to Vishvakarman, which is once again another title of Prajapati. Quote, "That which is earlier than this earth and heaven, before the asuras and gods had being, what was the germ, Garbha, primeval, which the waters received, where all the gods were seen together. The waters, they received that germ primeval, wherein the gods were gathered all together. It rested set upon the unborn's navel, that one wherein abide all things existing." Unquote. We may begin to notice that this golden embryo of the Rigveda is already very similar to the cosmic egg found in Orphic and other cosmogonies. And in other Vedic texts, it becomes more clear that the golden embryo is indeed another way of describing the cosmic egg, as the egg imagery is more emphasized in these other texts. In Atharva Veda 4.2.8, Hiranyagarbha is said to have a golden shell form around him as he emerges from the dark waters. First, this golden shell must form, then he completes his emergence from the waters. Atharva Veda 4.2.6 through 8 reads, quote, "The deathless waters, born in law, receiving, protected all the germ in the beginning, waters divine who had the god above them. In the beginning rose Hiranyagarbha, even at his birth, sole lord of all creation. He fixed and firmly established earth and heaven. In the beginning, generating offspring, the waters brought an embryo into being, and even as it sprang to life, it had a covering of gold." Unquote. In Shatapatha Brahmana, this same narrative is told, but again, more details are provided that flesh out what is happening. The higher self of Prajapati, the unmanifest and formless Prajapati Purusha, said to be made up of fire and air, first creates the waters. When waters have been created, he then is said to form the shell of the egg, and then finally to manifest himself within this egg as its embryo. The egg then gives birth to him again, the text proclaiming him in that moment to be the manifested Brahman. So the unmanifest Prajapati summons the eggshell into existence in the waters, and also is the essence and totality of the egg that births himself into manifestation as the reborn form of the Brahman. Although Prajapati is the essence and totality of the egg, the shell is only one part of the total egg, only the vehicle of manifestation for the totality God who has formed it. And thus, the shell of the egg is not that one, or Prajapati itself. Here are the relevant lines from Shatapatha Brahmana 6.1.1.1 through 11. Quote, "Verily, in the beginning there was here the non-existent, the vital airs. They, the vital airs, being kindled, created 7 separate persons, Purusha. They said, Surely, being thus, we shall not be able to generate. Let us make these 7 persons one person. And that person, i.e. Purusha, which became Prajapati, is this very Agni, fire. Now this person, Prajapati, desired, quote, May I be more than one, may I be reproduced, unquote. He toiled, he practiced austerity. He created the waters out of Vak, speech, that is. He desired, quote, May I be reproduced from these waters, unquote. He entered the waters with that triple science. Thence an egg arose. He touched it, quote, Let it exist and multiply, unquote. So he said, From it the Brahman was first created, the triple science. Hence they say, quote, The Brahman is the firstborn of this all, unquote. Now the embryo, which was inside, was created as the foremost, Agri, inasmuch as it was created foremost, Agram, of this all. And that which was the shell became the earth, unquote. The eggshell itself, as we can see, becomes earth, and in other versions divides into sky earth, Dyava Prithvi, as is also made very clear in the Orphic version of the Cosmic Egg myth. When the egg is split apart, the top half of the shell becomes Uranos, sky, while the bottom half of the shell becomes Gaia, earth. The Brahmana description of Prajapati forming the eggshell that he then manifests within accords perfectly also with the Vedic descriptions of the relationship between Prajapati and Dyava Prithvi, aka Sky Earth. The Vedas say that Vishvakarman, or Tvashtar, created Sky Earth as a house to live in. Vishvakarman and Tvashtar, meaning all-maker and craftsman, are simply well-established epithets of Prajapati in his important role of cosmic craftsman. As Gonda summarizes, quote, Now as is well known, the term Vishvakarman occurs also as an epithet or attribute of Prajapati. VS 1261. Quote, Prajapati, the god who accomplishes everything, Vishvakarma, must release her, unquote, with whom he elsewhere is expressly identified, Shatapatha Brahmana 8.2.1.10, quote, Vishvakarman doubtless is Prajapati, unquote, and 8.2.3.13 and 9.4.1.12. Also, Aitareya Brahmana 4.22.9, quote, Prajapati having created offspring became Vishvakarman, unquote, unquote. In sum, the unmanifest Prajapati Vishvakarman summons a material eggshell into being, which is Sky Earth. He then manifests and is born within it. That is, the shell forms around him as he is manifesting as the golden embryo or egg. The Sky Earth shell is like his house or clothing, and actually Prajapati himself is the whole entire egg and its essence, since he is identified with the totality. Sky Earth, Dyava Prithvi, on the other hand, is only the material shell, the creation and housing of the manifest Prajapati. Sky Earth in itself is then not equivalent to that one. Sky Earth is only the shell of that one, the material dimension, and this is why Ymir, who is Sky Earth, is not the mythic match of that one. Most importantly, this material Sky Earth shell has to manifest first, and then Prajapati is born as the complete totality only after the formation of this material shell. The birth of this total Prajapati is the emergence of that one from the dark waters, as narrated in the Rigveda creation hymn. This creation hymn does not mention the event of the formation of the shell, but only tells of that one coming into being and emerging completed. Now that we have seen the full picture, we know that the creation of the shell has simply been left unsaid in this Rigveda version, but it would be implicit in the event. First, the shell forms, then that one emerges from the waters to complete the moment of creation, as the Atharva Veda version makes more explicit. This is the order, and this is perfectly reflected in the Norse myth when we understand that Ymir is none other than sky-earth, and Buri is the completed Prajapati, or that one, progenitor of the gods and especially of the Rudra-type god directly, that is, Odin. Jan Gonda tells us that, quote, in Taittiriya Samhita 5.6.4.2 and 7.1.5.1, the waters are not alone. Prajapati in the form of wind existed also, being on a lotus leaf which floated on the water. And it was he who started the work of creating the earth. Unquote. We see once again that a disembodied form of Prajapati, who is composed of wind, is the one who begins the creation of the material earth. Algis Usdavinis explains the fiery winds that compose this higher disembodied Prajapati Vishvakarman thus, quote, the heavens sing, and the sound is that of the vowels. This singing stems from the silent one and shows the way back to him. The roaring sounds of divine irradiation, elampsis, may be described as rays of light, as winds of spirit, or as the life-bringing breaths, rotating like the spokes of a wheel. The Sanskrit prana, breath or vital spirit, is roughly equivalent to the Greek pneuma. A.K. Kumaraswamy argues that these vital breaths of Brahma, Agni or Vishvakarman, all-worker, are imagined of as streams or torrents of light, sound, and life. These streams are called nadya because they sounded, anadata, as they went their way. And in the same way, the breath is a noise, prano vai nada, and when it sounds, all else resounds. Agni, like the Chaldean noetic and paternal fire, himself is the breath, the ever-living fire from which creative speech is flowing down through the fiery channels, sometimes compared to the 7 rays of the sun. These 7 rays may be identified to the 7 rishis, divine seers, sages, or streams of wisdom, since the word rishi itself contains the root meaning rush, flow, shine. Hence the solar Vishvakarman, the supreme Agni, is the principle which transcends the 7 lights or rays of manifestation. He is comparable to Atum Ra or Amun Ra. Essentially, Agni is beyond the 7 pneumata, the pneumatic threads or wind cords, Vata Raju, tied to the hypercosmic sun, namely Agni himself, or to the super-celestial pole star. The fiery breaths, or channels of Agni, the all-working fire, are analogous to the ethereal rays, ochatai, in the Neoplatonic cosmology, unquote. So it is this higher spiritual essence of Prajapati Vishvakarman, composed only of fiery wind and thus also identified with Agni and Vayu, that causes the earth-sky eggshell to take shape, so that he can manifest within it in an embodied form. This golden egg then emerges from the waters that he had hovered over in disembodied form and gives birth to him as the totality of the created cosmos. The drips that form Ymir are said to be due to, quote, the breath of heat, unquote, caused by, quote, that which sent the heat, unquote, and thus issuing out of the primordial fires of Muspelheim. This fire that sends its breath to form the sky-earth shell should then be the correct parallel of the disembodied Prajapati, who is made of wind and fire, and then forms the shell to manifest itself. The Chandogya Upanishad 3.19.1 through 4 reiterates roughly the same pattern of creation in a compressed version, but it's worth quoting. Quote, "In the beginning, this was non-existent. It became existent. It grew. It turned into an egg. The egg lay for the time of a year. The egg broke open. The two halves were one of silver, the other of gold. The silver one became this earth, the golden one, the sky. The thick membrane of the white, the mountains, the thin membrane of the yoke, the mist with the clouds, the small veins, the rivers, the fluid, the sea, and what was born from it was Aditya, the sun." Unquote. The note explains, quote, "Aditya, or the sun, had before been represented as one of the 4 feet of Brahman. He is now represented as Brahman, or to be meditated on as such." Unquote. We can see once again that the shell of the egg is merely the substance that becomes the earth and sky, and that a different deity identified with Brahman is the embodiment and essence of the whole egg. The Manusmriti also tells a version of the same cosmic egg myth, and in the commentary on this version it is emphasized that the shell itself is made of clay, that is, primordial matter. It is then overtly the substance of earth and of the hard dome of the sky that is separated off from it. This shell is subsequently made into the sky and earth. Manusmriti 1.5 through 9 and 12 read, quote, "This world was in existence in the form, as it were, of dense darkness, unperceived, undifferentiated, incogitable, hence incognizable, as it was wholly merged in deep sleep. Thereafter, the Supreme Being, Hiranyagarbha, self-born, unmanifest, and bringing into view this universe, appeared, dispelling darkness, and having his creative power operating upon the elemental substances and other things. He who is apprehended beyond the senses, who is subtle, unmanifest, and eternal, absorbed in all created things, and inconceivable, appeared by himself. Desiring to create the several kinds of created things, he, in the beginning, by mere willing, produced out of his own body water, and in that he threw the seed. That became the golden egg, resplendent like the sun. In that egg he, Hiranyagarbha, himself was born as Brahma, the grandfather of the whole world. Out of those 2 pieces of the egg, he formed heaven and earth, and between them the Akasha, the 8 quarters, and the eternal receptacle of water." Unquote. The revered Manusmriti commentator Medhatithi summarizes, quote, "First of all, primordial matter develops in the form of clay, i.e., on account of the contact of Hiranyagarbha's seed, it becomes solidified, and this is what is described as having become an egg. Golden, gold made up of gold, i.e., in its brilliance it resembled the thing made of gold. Brahma is Hiranyagarbha himself. The exact signification of the term himself has already been explained. The meaning is that he had originally, as Hiranyagarbha, assumed a body by the force of occult powers. He gave up that body and entered within the egg. Or it may be that when he created water, Hiranyagarbha had no body. Hence, he took up a body within the egg. Or again, the being spoken of as he who, in verse 7, was different from the Brahma who is described here as being born in the egg. This would be in keeping with what is going to be stated in verse 11 in regard to the latter being created by him, i.e., created by the Supreme Lord described in verse 7. But under this last explanation, how could he be said to be himself born? And the text apparently speaks, as Brahma, of him who was himself born in the egg. Unquote. We thus can see here the commentator trying to decide whether the disembodied form of Prajapati who summons the egg into existence is the same deity as he who is then born within the egg. But he resolves in the end that they most likely are continuous, as the tradition seems to support. Only by understanding this special order of the formation and emergence of the cosmic egg can we understand how these versions of creation match the Greek version found in Hesiod. In Hesiod, we are told that there was chaos, and then Gaia appeared. Why does Gaia appear first of all after chaos, if that one appears first in the Vedic version? Gaia, Earth, seems a strange match of that one, the deity of the entire totality. Of course, we have our answer now that we see the full picture. Gaia, Earth, is here standing for the sky-earth material shell, since she then gives birth to Uranos, this sky-earth material shell being made of clay. Why does Earth appear first from the chaos? Because the first step in the primordial myth was that the material shell in which sky and earth were yet to be divided had to be summoned into existence. Sky and earth then split off from one another or give birth to one another and become the sky and earth of the manifested world. In this way, the Hesiodic and Norse versions are in agreement when we see Gaia and Ymir both as the sky-earth material shell unities, and these are then harmonized with the Vedic version when we read the fuller versions in which the material shell forms first of all, one step before the emergence of the manifested Prajapati. This same principle also seems to be why the Germanic god Twisto, mentioned by Tacitus, is said to be, quote, earthborn, unquote. The earth here mentioned is, like Gaia, the shell of the egg, and Twisto seems to be etymologically connected to Tvashtar, one of the titles of Prajapati as craftsman. Earth once again appears first as the material shell, as in Hesiod. Then the Prajapati god arises from the shell second. In this sense, earthborn. What further solidifies and must absolutely confirm that Ymir is the sky-earth shell and Buri is that one, aka Prajapati, is the symbolic imagery depicted in their respective myths. That one of the Vedic myth is the primordial axis mundi, an egg emerging from waters, and from him the sacred tree grows. Another repetition of the life-giving central axis. Dark waters giving rise to the egg or axis mundi is an image of the god rising upward out of dark liquid. This is the basic image implied by the Vedic versions, but it is made the most explicit in the Egyptian version. Atum rises out of the inert waters called Nun, as an earthen mound. Earth-sky are implicit and are given form as parts of Atum subsequently in this version. Atum then creates Shu from the overflow of his own passion, just as Prajapati does when he gives rise to Rudra via his own passion. Shu then divides sky-earth, as the Rudra-type god does in all the versions I have cataloged in a previous video. So, Atum is the primordial mound arising from inert waters. Nun means inert, the primordial axis mundi itself, and father of the gods. Thus, the symbolic imagery of Atum emerging as a mound is crucial to who he is and what his myth signifies. The Vedic and Egyptian myths are in close accord on this and are telling almost the identical myth, right down to this god then emitting his passionate seed, which becomes the god who divides sky-earth. It is crucial that Atum rises up out of inert waters, precisely because this is the emergence of the symbolic axis mundi, or egg, differentiating itself from the waters at their central point. The mound thus has to be central, and it has to be rising up out of the waters. What do we see then with the Ymir and Buri myths in terms of the symbolic imagery of their births? This is where comparative mythologists typically get very sloppy and try to say that since Ymir is created from a primordial liquid, that he thus matches that one who is also born from a liquid. But we have to be far more precise in matching the symbolic imagery of these myths, in part because we are able to be. Not every creation from liquid is the same, and the myths provide a much clearer and more accurate match for the imagery as it actually appears. Ymir is not born up out of waters as that one, or the cosmic egg, seems to be, or as Atum overtly is. Ymir does not form as a central point differentiating itself from surrounding liquid. Instead, Ymir is dripped down from a flow of venom, according to the poem Vafthrûdnir, and from drips of yeasty venom, according to the Prose Edda. This is an entirely different image from the appearance of the Axis Mundi god up out of the waters. Drips of a malignant substance form together, and there is Ymir. He does not separate himself from any waters, and it's not clear the direction of his emergence in relation to them. There is no particular axis mundi or mound-like imagery here. Since we know that Ymir is actually sky-earth, and that the unmanifest Prajapati summons sky-earth as the material shell first of all, we can show that the dripping of yeasty venom to form Ymir is actually the formation of this material shell. In the Prose Edda, the yeast venom drips are said to be due to, quote, the breath of heat, unquote, which is caused, quote, by the power of that which sent the heat, unquote. Ymir, like his ironic parallel Gaiomard, is the source of only the material and mortal level of creation, and venom being the source of matter is a much better fit than venom being the source of the totality of the cosmos, including everything that is immortal. If we were to try to say that Ymir was that one, we would have to say that venom was the source of this totality. The shell is formed from mud according to the commentary on the Manusmriti, and from venom in the Norse version. These are comparable on a conceptual level, as mud and yeasty venom both imply a somewhat questionable and mundane quality. Then we are told that Buri is born. Audhumbla licks his head free, and he emerges upward out of the inert and formless water element, the ice, just like Atum and that one emerge from dark and inert waters. What are waters when they are inert and without any heat, as they might be in a primordial moment? At least one way to explain them would be as ice, the inert type of the water element. And so in the Norse version, Buri emerges from ice. The image of the emergence of the head of Buri, licked free from the ice by Audhumbla, is the true symbol of the axis mundi, just as the head of Atum emerging from the waters is in the Egyptian case. Both are the primordial mound, a central point rising up out of the inert liquid element, and this axis mundi god will then be the progenitor of the gods, as is Buri. Buri's head being revealed from the ice by the licking of Audhumbla is more or less the parallel of Atum's head being revealed from the waters of Nun by the waves, the active energy of these waters. In short, the image of the dripping of liquid to form Ymir does not match the image of the emergence of that one from the waters. Buri's emergence from ice actually does match the emergence of that one when it is realized that the ice is simply the inert primordial water element devoid of any heat. The ice is the dark waters. The venom dripping down has a different role. None of these details can be understood without assigning Ymir properly as Sky Earth and Buri as the completed form of that one. This is a question of precision, of Occam's razor, of stopping the sloppiness that has made such a muddle of interpreting the Indo-European creation myth. Trying to stretch Ymir into being a partial, shifted parallel of that one is a failure of Occam's razor, because it would be completely unnecessary. A comparison that is mythically and imagistically a much better match for Ymir exists in the Sky-Earth shell that has to form before that one emerges, and thus he has a well-defined and precise role. Identifying Ymir with Sky-Earth thus requires far fewer assumptions and things to explain away than does identifying Ymir with that one, which raises a host of other problems. A comparison that is much more precise for Buri also exists, showing us that his emergence from ice is a carefully chosen image loaded with symbolic significance and retaining an archaic link to similar primordial mythologies around the world. If we ignore the purposeful details of these myths, then all that has been meticulously preserved for us by the bards has been for naught, and the actual meaning of the myth is lost. Before this video, you may not have even known that the material shell had to form before that one could emerge as the cosmic egg. Can you imagine now trying to claim that the Norse tradition simply doesn't have this crucial step in its creation myth, or that it isn't the dripping of venom to form Ymir? Of course, it should now be obvious that this is the case, and we are lucky that the picture can be so obvious once we look at it from the right angle. As such, the Norse myth has perfectly preserved this portion of the Proto-Indo-European creation myth, with precise details that are told to us for a reason, and pride should be taken in the meticulousness of these preserved details. The only thing that the Norse myth isn't clear about is the relationship between the two primordial giants, Ymir and Buri, and this lack of explanation has caused all the confusion. If the explanation I have provided of this relationship is set aside, the question of why Norse myth has two apparently unrelated primordial giants that emerge one after the other will continue a mystery. I will be so bold as to say that no other explanation for their relation exists, or ever will. The best alternative anyone will be able to offer will be to claim that Ymir and Buri are simply not related, or to ignore the question of their relationship altogether. This will be to tragically miss the core of the central myth of Norse tradition, which has carefully presented a precise, full-fledged, and extremely ancient theology. My book, Taliesin's Map, The Comparative Guide to Celtic Mythology, is available from Amazon. Link in the description. I am currently working on a follow-up book entitled Briochun's Tower, which will include the information in this video and related topics. Subscribing, liking, and sharing these videos helps spread my first book, and in turn helps me to fund the time to complete this follow-up book. Thanks for watching.